Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Nelson. As the Technology Marketing Analyst at GlobalDWS, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third webinar in our Innovation in the Workplace series, Smart Buildings, IoT for Smart Buildings, and the Future of Work. In today's webinar, we're going to be showing you how you can free up time, boost employee productivity, improve your processes, and ultimately make your business run as efficiently as possible through IoT and smart building technologies. You probably already know that IoT offers businesses unprecedented opportunities for cost savings, optimization, and savings. But today we're going to be showing you exactly what a smart building is and why having an IoT strategy is so important. So after we discuss today's IoT market, our subject matter experts will walk you through the fundamentals of smart building strategy, exploring the many innovation possibilities and other examples of IoT technology already being used in a variety of industries. And finally, we'll be showing you how you can enable this exciting and emerging new technology to not only get ahead, but stay ahead in today's ever-competitive business landscape. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to submit any questions you may have at any point to the Q&A box located at the upper right corner of your tab. At the end of the webinar, we'll be answering your questions, so make sure to stick around to hear what our panel of experts have to say. But first, here's a little bit about us. So at GlobalDWS, we are a systems integrator and solutions provider focused on enabling the future of work for our clients. By leveraging over a decade of experience in industry transformation and emerging technologies, we deliver advanced workplace solutions to the market and support our partners in achieving their unique business objectives through innovation and design thinking. You probably already know that IoT and smart building technology is quickly becoming an essential consideration for businesses and organizations looking to maintain a competitive edge. But did you know that despite this market's recent growth, most businesses aren't utilizing building optimization or connecting their IoT devices? Most buildings, including older buildings and new construction, have not leveraged opportunities to increase their energy efficiency. Energy waste is high due to inefficient heating and cooling, lighting, and other power systems. Commercial buildings offer a particularly good opportunity to reduce energy costs because of their size, their long-term occupants, their typically more sophisticated building managers, and their large carbon footprint. Furthermore, the energy costs of commercial buildings can be high, increasing the magnitude of financial incentives to make emission reduction upgrades. Further down the line, the benefits of having more sophisticated building management systems are extended to the everyday users of the building, eventually fostering a smart building ecosystem that enables the efficiency, productivity, and health of all systems and users of the building. So while everyone wants to optimize their business by reducing costs or boosting employee productivity, you may be wondering, what exactly do we mean when we say smart building, and where does IoT fit into that conversation? Simply put, a smart building is any building that uses Internet of Things, otherwise known as IoT, devices, sensors, software, online connectivity to monitor various building characteristics, analyze the data, and generate insights around usage patterns and trends that can be used to optimize the building's environment and operations. Many of you are likely familiar with the concept of a smart home, using a personal assistant and or smart home hub to control your many smart devices, environments, or processes. A smart home is similar to a smart building in that they both control aspects of the environment, but ultimately the uses and functions for smart buildings far surpass that of a smart home. So now that we've covered the bases, I will be handing the presentation off to my colleague, Dante Dardane, to introduce you to what today's IoT market looks like and how you can make sure your business is prepared for the future of work.
So thank you, Jessica, for providing that background information on what we mean when we say IoT and smart buildings, because with any emerging technology, there's always or there could always be a bit of a learning gap or an understanding gap. So we just wanted to start by really establishing what an IoT solution is and a smart building is. And now I'm going to briefly talk about the IoT market and more specifically, where the opportunities are, why is it growing, and a few more points. So I can take the next slide. To continue, so as I said, I want to talk about the IoT market to give you a better understanding of the maturity and the readiness of the market. And to start, as you can see on the screen, the IoT market is massive. In 2018, it was worth about $212 billion, and it's expected to grow to almost $1.3 trillion by 2026, and we're not that far off from reaching that timeline. And depending on where you look, you may see the predictive number in 2026 to be $2 trillion or $3 trillion, but the point is the market is massive and it's continuing to grow year over year. And I want to talk about some of the reasons why it's growing. So to start, there's about 9 billion IoT-enabled devices that are built and deployed each year. And these devices, while many of them may be in homes, a lot of them are being adopted by businesses. And one of the reasons is because IoT devices can capture data and analyze data that would be very difficult for a human to do or extremely costly. And once again, these devices can capture, analyze data, and also present this data in various formats that we can then leverage to make more data-driven decisions about our lives, our businesses, and our society. And with that many devices and sensors being built and deployed, there also has to be platforms that can manage these devices and connect them to each other so that these devices aren't just capturing information individually, but they're able to communicate, which can give you deeper insights about the environment, business, and your home. So I encourage our viewers to consider the potential that these IoT devices can bring to your businesses, and what are those insights that maybe you're not able to access or you haven't considered trying to capture, and start thinking about how you can be a part of this massive market that, as I said, is continuing to grow each year. Next slide. So the point here is to understand the potential benefits and opportunities that IoT and smart building solutions can offer, and specifically through digital transformation. And throughout the presentation, you'll hear a lot of buzzwords, so we'll try and explain what they mean for anyone that's maybe unfamiliar. So when we say digital transformation, we mean, how can we use technology or digital technologies to either improve existing business processes or create new ones. And technology is an enabling tool that can really transform the way we work. And just one primary example is COVID-19, which has impacted almost every industry and has almost forced some industries to find new ways to clean their offices or to engage with customers without it being in person. But before you start on that journey of transforming your business processes, it really starts with business insights. So, what is that, or what are the, pieces of information about your business that you need in order to understand how you need to make those changes and adapt. And once businesses are equipped with these sensors and devices, they'll be able to gain access to these business insights, which will in turn allow them to improve their operations, create new business models, and also generate new streams of revenue. And all of this comes from digital transformation. And in this case, it's specifically about IoT. And what are those insights that IoT can give you that you're probably not thinking about or capturing right now, which could impact the growth and maintain the competitiveness of a business. Next slide, please. So when we think about IoT and smart buildings, I think for a lot of people, and especially me before I became more familiar with it, I thought it was just about connecting a bunch of devices to each other, or installing a bunch of devices throughout your buildings and, waiting for those devices to tell you the things you need to know so you can take action on it. But it's really not just about capturing data. It's about intelligence and data intelligence. And, when we think about intelligence, and a definition that I found online was intelligence is the combination of information or data that informs decisions. So if you're thinking about, moving to a new city, you're going to have to consider multiple things all kind of at the same time. But if you consider them individually, then it may not give you the context that you need to really understand what's going on. And one great example of that is with fleet management platforms. And what a lot of these platforms can do is you'll install different sensors and devices throughout a truck, and it will be tracking different parts of the engine. It could be tracking how fast the driver is going, where the car is located. You can maybe even be pulling some information from other sources, like what the weather might be like, what the geographical makeup of the route that the truck driver has to travel on, and gathering information from not just the actual truck and the driver, but also pulling from various other sources will not only allow these systems to provide you with valuable insights, but it'll make them intelligent because they can communicate. They're analyzing information from different sources rather than collecting data in their own individual silos, which could give you a lot of information, but it doesn't give you the depth and the context that you need to really make these massive decisions about how you can improve your business operations and change how you engage with customers and so on. Next slide. So now that Jessica and I have articulated what we mean when we say IoT solutions and smart buildings, and now you have some more context about today's IoT market and where the demand is coming from and how businesses can realize or reap all the benefits. Now I'm going to hand it over to Matt Good, who has a tremendous amount of experience in the IoT and smart building market, and he's going to share with you some of what a smart building strategy could look like and how you can get into this market. And he's going to take it away for the next couple of slides. So I will hand it over to you, Matt. It's all yours.
Thank you, Dante. So Dante talked quite a little bit about IoT in general, but what I'd like to talk about specifically is how do smart buildings play with, what is their part of IoT? And so if you think about it, if we can go to the next slide, everything that we've got is digitally connected. So that's kind of that's the idea behind IoT in general. But why exactly do we do that for buildings? So the main reasons behind that, and if you think about the different costs that an organization has, the most expensive cost that they have is generally their people. So in order to be relevant, we need to make sure that within the building, we are doing everything that we can to enhance the productivity of the people that are working within that building. Our second big expense is going to be related to the space that we have. So we want to leverage the different systems that we have within a building and IoT in general to help us make sure that we are making the most of the space that we do have. As again, that's a very large operating cost. And then the third category, which is really the smallest, and a lot of times this gets confused within the buildings industry, is really reducing the cost of operating the space that we have. So think utilities, think janitorial, etc. And so that's where we want to leverage the IoT systems and the smart building systems to help us optimize the building utilization. So for a lot of property owners, one of the questions that they've got is, okay, this is a really big thing and it can be overwhelming. And so you've got a question around, okay, well, where do I even start? Or simply, I've got a number of older buildings that they think that I can't necessarily do anything to make these buildings smart, which that's not exactly true. So if we can go to the next slide. Where we're trying to go is, remember, we have to start somewhere. So where we want to start is around the building itself. And so we want to cover the basics off with making sure that we're operating the building in the most intelligent fashion. And so part of this comes into, this is some of the lowest hanging fruit that we have within the smart building world, but it's also foundational. And so we're going to need that foundation as we start to layer on additional services that we can offer within the building and the workplace. And so once we've been able to affect the ability to operate in a more automated fashion, then we can start to layer on things like predictive management and maintenance of the systems that we have in the building, all the way up through the point where we can actually make the business or the building react to occupants, as well as employees, students, and faculty, regardless of your constituency that's within the building. So can we go to the next slide? So, and this talks a little bit more about what I was just referring to, where you want to start out and really with somewhat of a facilities-centric mindset. So I want to connect in HVAC systems. I want to connect in lighting systems. I want to connect in anything energy management related. And all of those systems, they're important to the operation of the building, but they don't exactly interact with an occupant or an employee on a regular basis. Those are just some things that are kind of given. But once we've built that, that foundation, we're able to start adding in additional elements where people do start to see some things, like the introduction of service robots to help from a security perspective. So this would help to provide scale to an on-site security guard, or to add scale to an existing janitorial crew, where we can automate some of that through the use of robots. We can also start to harness some of the data that we get out of these systems. And so my favorite example to use is the occupancy sensor that is required in most buildings from an energy code perspective. That's typically tied into the lighting system. And so if you're talking about a large open office area, it may not necessarily be quite as helpful. But when you get into meeting rooms and private offices and some smaller areas, if I'm able to harness the data coming from that lighting system that has the occupancy sensor attached, I can start to leverage that data to understand, how am I using that space? How often is that space used? So two executives that absolutely refuse to share an office, as an example, when faced with empirical data that shows that the two of them collectively, assuming non-pandemic times, are never in the office more at the same time more than once or twice a month, all of a sudden you can have a much more relevant conversation about how ineffectively we're using the space by providing two separate offices for those executives when the majority of the time that they're traveling, just as an example. And we're able to do that with smart buildings by harnessing the data coming from those systems without needing to add any additional telemetry to help us understand how we're using the space. The other areas where we're able to start adding on are really around your signage and your multimedia aspects of the building, so that you can start to have new communication mechanisms for delivering information to your occupants, as well as the way that we interact with the physical security systems as far as gaining access into the building and moving between unsecured and secured areas. And finally, as we start looking towards somewhat of, I would call the smart building utopia, that's where we get to the point where we're able to deliver personalized experiences to employees, where an area of the building is able to remember what my preferences are. So think when Matt goes into a small meeting room, Matt likes to have the temperature especially cool, versus when Jessica goes into that same space, she likes it a little bit warmer. And the building's able to dynamically adjust based upon who's in the space at that given time. But it's really bigger than that, because that really sounds like hey, this is kind of a nice to have thing, but not necessarily a requirement. It's really all about helping an occupant find what they need when they need it, and deliver it to them. However, I always caution organizations on, you've got to be realistic about this. There's a lot of work that goes in at level 1 and level 2 with adding in these different systems that exist within the buildings before you're going to be able to deliver those types of experiences. So it comes much later in the journey. Can we go to the next slide? So in order to start, most organizations, the best idea is to implement an integrated platform for smart buildings. One challenge that organizations have is that there are a lot of companies that exist in the real estate technology space today. So think the HVAC / building automation companies, as well as some of the lighting companies. They caught on to the smart building fad or trend, if you will, and they have begun to market their products as being able to deliver the smart building capabilities. However, not all of those are exactly created the same. So organizations need to do the due diligence and make sure that whatever platform that they choose is really cut out for the job. And I advise most organizations, you're really looking for something that is just that, a smart building platform, and isn't a lighting system, as an example, with smart building capabilities. But once you start to build the smart building integrated platform, what you're trying to do from there is integrate each of those individual systems that you see across the bottom of the screen. And these systems exist both in old buildings and new buildings. Generally speaking, if a building hasn't been updated in the past 15 years or so, that one might be not easily able to adapt to some of these technologies, but the lifetime or the asset cycle for a lot of these technology systems within the buildings are in the 15 to 20 year area, whereas we're used to more of the 3 to 5 to 6 year life cycle on the technology side of the world. But any of the systems that you've been able to buy for the past 10 or 15 years, from an HVAC perspective, from a lighting perspective, from a physical security perspective, they're all networkable, and they can usually be integrated to varying degrees. But the idea is you begin to integrate these upstream into a smart building integrated platform. And now you're able to start to share information between those different systems to make each of them operate in a more intelligent capacity than how it was able to operate on its own. So my favorite example that I like to use is, historically with HVAC, we turn on a given floor and we make that entire floor cool or warm, depending upon the weather. And we don't pay a whole lot of attention to exactly what's happening within the space, whether part of the space is being used and part of it isn't, because we don't have the information available to us to make anything better than a scheduled decision. So back to the example that I used earlier around the lighting systems and the occupancy sensors, that again, you're having to install those in most buildings because of building energy code. So the authorities having jurisdiction are dictating that you will have this. Why not use it? So in that example, I can start to take the lighting data that I get from that occupancy sensor that says Matt is in his office or Matt is not in his office. And I can relay that information over to the HVAC system in certain cases, and doesn't work in all cases, to basically say, hey, make sure that Matt's office is comfortable because Matt is there, or don't worry about Matt's office, you can turn that off and we can save a little bit of energy because Matt's traveling this week or no one is in that office. We can also use it to enhance scenarios like physical security. So whenever an intrusion alarm goes off, we can automatically turn on lights. There's simple things like that that we're able to do once we've integrated these different systems into the Smart Buildings platform that we're not able to do beforehand. And that's really the fundamental place where we have to start. Can we go to the next slide? So this is one of my favorite areas to talk about. So a lot of times I'm asked the question, okay, well, if I have all of these different devices and systems connected, doesn't that create an information security problem for me that I didn't necessarily have in the past? And this is a lot of times used as a reason for not pursuing a smart buildings project. The interesting thing is, as I'd mentioned earlier, for any of these systems that were purchased in the past 10 to 15 years, they've all been connected. And so because they've been connected, both your dumb and smart buildings alike have connected systems that are used for the management and operations of those systems today. And when these systems were created, my favorite example to use is a protocol called BACnet. BACnet was developed in the mid-90s, and information security was not exactly on the forefront of concerns back then the way that it is today. Those systems lack the ability to even do basic authentication of messages that are exchanged between different devices. So we have to pay attention and make sure from an IT perspective that we are able to protect those devices from the outside world, as well as any internal threats as well. So it's important that you think about smart buildings in the context of this can help your existing portfolio because there's an opportunity to mitigate some risk that may be inherent in some of the systems that you have today. Next slide. So again, with the vision, and GlobalDWS can help with figuring out what's the appropriate vision for your organization, but you really need to start with the basics around the basic operating systems of the building, the HVAC, the lighting, the cooling, the metering of utilities. And then once you're able to move on from there, you can start to layer in some additional services like the physical security systems that start to now interact with the occupants in the building. Then can we advance the slide? And then from there, we can start to add in multimedia and other enablement services. And then when we move to really the fourth stage, that's where we're moving things away from the building-centric view and more towards the people-centric view, since we have the buildings because of the people. And so this is where we're able to now start to enhance the experience that our employees, our students and faculty, our occupants alike all share when they enter into our building. Dante, back to you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Matt. So now we're slowly, unraveling the story, starting with, what is IoT, what are smart buildings, going into the market. Matt gave us some more context about the actual strategy and how businesses can start on this journey. And now I'm going to hand it over to Keon, who is one of the engineers at GlobalDWS, and he's very involved in the actual development of a lot of our solutions. And he's going to go through the actual technology side that's enabling these IoT solutions. And there's also a few demonstrations that we have planned to really articulate how these IoT devices can be used in businesses And yeah, so we hope you enjoy that towards the end of the segment, but I hand it over to you, Keon.
Great, thank you, Dante. And so yeah, my name is Keon Fayez. I'm a system engineer here at GlobalDWS. Part of my work has been working with sensors and other IoT components, ultimately to develop applications for businesses and incorporate these technologies into an IoT ecosystem, and also ensuring that they all communicate in the appropriate ways. Next slide, please. And so this slide captures how at GlobalDWS we imagine the modern workspace or workplace. So with the presence of all of these technologies and the technologies increasing in the workplace, we have all sorts of components from sensors to service robots, as well as voice interaction and AI solutions. So like your personal assistants, smart speakers, devices of that sort. And so as devices and sensors become cheaper and more capable, we see these number of devices go up. And I think it's important to just remember why we are implementing these components, what the big picture of that solution is, and just make sure that we're aligned, because these components can obviously get out of hand if we don't have a way of kind of maintaining them. And so that's kind of the whole idea behind the Internet of Things, right? And so in a smart building ecosystem, we are enabling and automating more advanced functions and processes. So this generally enhances the security of not just each individual device, but also the IoT ecosystem as a whole, because we're unifying that, all the protocols and all the processes that go in there. We're also able to generate some insights with data that maybe isn't being collected or maybe is being collected, but when we have all these devices communicate together, we start to see new types of insights that weren't previously possible. And with all of this, we're able to, we design experiences for the workplace where you are now part of that ecosystem. So that on the right-hand side, that workplace experience is really how do you fit into that IoT ecosystem, and maybe you sign in, as Matt was saying, the room knows who you are. So maybe that's a occupancy sensor or your phone's data, GPS, for example. So there's all sorts of solutions that are possible here in this space, and at the end to just optimize the workplace experience. And as well as health and well-being. This is one that we saw in COVID, was an area that we really were able to help out and just advance that field, it felt like, because we're involving these sensors. We're not creating new sensors, or we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're leveraging these sensors and these various technologies to make our workplace and other workplaces safer, and ensure that the employees and customers they all feel confident returning to work and also entering the workplace. And next slide, please. And so here's a high-level architecture of a smart building or IoT implementation. So typically these, on the left, I'll start with the left-hand side, sorry. We have our IoT devices or clients. So these are generally an array of devices. There's no, I want to say, limitation or a specific criteria that makes it a device. It's just, it plays a role in this ecosystem. They can be robots or edge devices, computers even can be IoT clients. We also have existing IoT devices such as thermostats or printers. Maybe they weren't smart, but maybe the device is smart, or maybe there's a component that makes it smart. And also sensors such as like room occupancy, I think is a very easy one. Does a simple task all the way up to sensors that are sort of cameras. They are sensors. They're not collecting images, but they're sensing something using computer vision. And that's an area that we see a great deal of work being done in, and very reliable also. And moving on, we have the connectivity layer. So this is where the cloud comes in, and we have our security that is communicating between the cloud as well as the devices that are on the floor or wherever they are. And then the application layer, which is in charge of, that's kind of the business application layer. So in charge of the analytics, data processing, any sort of device management or application management that's necessary, that is in that middle piece there. And then towards the end, we have the presentation layer. So this can be an array of solutions depending on, of course, the use case or the requirements. And typically they're, an array of web or mobile applications, robotic applications. They could be AI functions or something even as simple as a report that's sent to your email. All of that could be an automated process, and it fits into that whole IoT ecosystem. And so the idea, the big picture here is, as we have enough devices towards that left-hand side, so that our data becomes significant and that we are able to use those devices and its data in an appropriate and efficient way, we start to develop the business applications that's where the smart building comes into play. The picture of the smart building starts to form. We're collecting real-time data as well as data that comes in packets, periodically maybe, just for efficiency and optimization reasons. And then we present that information through the presentation layer to the appropriate people. Next slide. And so here is kind of a example of our office in Toronto. If you're nearby in Toronto, then stop by, feel free to ask us some questions or see how this works a little bit more hands-on. But this is a high level. We'll go through these demos on the right-hand side shortly, but just to walk you through the general ecosystem here, we have, of course, our sensors. So occupancy, asset tracking, temperature, and smart buttons and other sensors, of course. But these are kind of our triggers or things that are monitoring and relaying information, and then plus the devices. So here in this diagram, we have the voice integration platform, which is an Alexa, and we have those around the office so that no matter where you are able to access those applications and IoT functions. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, we have the robots, so robots and mobile apps as well. And we'll walk through those so they hopefully make a little bit more sense. So next slide, please. And so this is the disinfection service robot. As the video plays, it has asset tracking and human presence and communicates with the occupancy sensors. Here's when the human presence is working. It's sensing and then just sending that information off to the system to turn off the lights. And that's where we're maintaining our health and safety of the employees, the customers, and we're also automating the disinfection process. And next slide.
Alexa, forecast for today?
Currently, in Scarborough, it's 20 degrees Celsius with mostly cloudy skies. Tonight, you can expect rainy weather with a low of 13 degrees. Have a nice Wednesday night.
Alexa, am I free tomorrow between 2 and 4 p.m.?
You don't have any availability tomorrow from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Alexa, book a meeting in my next available time slot.
Okay, which day and what time?
Tomorrow,
For what time?
4 p.m.
And what's the name of the event?
Breakout session.
That's breakout session on Thursday, June 3rd at 4 p.m., right?
Yes.
Okay, I've added that.
Alexa, please set a timer for lunch break for 15 minutes.
Lunch break timer, 15 minutes, starting now.
And so that shows how voice solutions or personal assistants that are everyday devices, now everyday devices, they're integrated with business applications. And that kind of plays a role in the IoT from a control and also monitoring perspective. And demo, we have the reception robot, where once someone enters the room, the reception robot recognizes that, steps forward, and presents them with the application. In this case, it's the reception app and COVID screening. So this is the reception where it will actually navigate you to whoever you're here to see. So it uses facial recognition to identify if you're a new customer or an existing customer. And if you're existing, it'll recognize why you're here. So it'll ask you, are you here to meet someone or for whatever reason, and then it'll navigate you over to their room, as we just saw in that example there. And so those are the 3 examples that we had lined up for today. And like I said, feel free to stop by the office. We have all sorts of solutions that we are working on, always in just the integration between the different devices and IoT systems is at the core what we're about at GlobalDWS. And David Weinberger said, everything is a sensor for everything else. And I think this becomes more and more relevant as the years go on and as the weeks and months go on, really, because technology moves so quick that these sensors, like now our phones are sensors, and those sensors are sensors, and sensors, you get what I mean. And John Markoff said the blurring of the line between humans and their machines is well underway. And with that, I will pass it back off to Dante.
Yeah, thank you very much, Keon. It was really interesting seeing the technical side of these solutions and also the 3 demonstrations. And I just want to remind all of the attendees that we do have a Q&A section, and I already started to see some questions coming in. So if you do have any questions about any of the material that we're presenting, or any sort of general questions about IoT or smart building solutions, feel free to submit them through the chat, and we can publish them and we'll try to answer them at the end. But if we don't have time, then we'll make sure that we're able to reach out to you probably through email, and we'll try our best to give you a response. So now that we've kind of told the story of IoT generally, I want to now speak to some of the professional services that we offer that will support you along your adoption journey for IoT, smart building solutions, and this also applies to any other technology. And for this slide, the point here is that before you start any project, there needs to be some kind of structure or framework. And this is especially true with enterprise technology or enterprise level projects. And with that approach and framework, it could either be one that our company follows, which I'll speak to in the next 2 slides, or it could be a framework that maybe your company follows, and we could always accommodate. But the point is in any project, regardless of the scale, there has to be some kind of structure or framework in order for it to be successful. And with IoT, although it can provide a tremendous amount of value, the high degree of complexity that some of these projects contain, creates some unforeseen challenges that may cause these IoT and smart building projects to fail. And some of those challenges could be unforeseen costs, pricing challenges, security concerns, or even a general lack of knowledge or internal expertise that may impact the successfulness of the project. And with all of these obstacles, it raises the question, how can organizations avoid these issues to develop scalable, secure, efficient, and profitable solutions? Because at the end of the day, technology is meant to enable humans to do things that we're not capable of doing on our own, or allow us to do, pretty incredible things. So how can we, approach these IoT projects and smart building projects in a way that will ensure success at the end of the day? And on the screen, you can see some of the key elements that we look at in assessing the successfulness of an IoT solution. And some of these probably stand out more than others, like scalability and total cost of ownership, because once again, the worst thing is to invest all of this time and resources into a project, and then you realize that your budget is too small to carry this project for the next 3, 4, or even 10 years. So it's really important to establish those partnerships with companies that have the expertise, that can focus on ensuring that there's some sort of plan to mitigate these risks. And we believe that GlobalDWS is the perfect partner, not only because of the expertise that we possess, but also the vast network of experts that we're able to connect with if ever there's a need. So yeah, there's a tremendous amount of value in partnering with a company like us to ensure that these projects are successful. And the next slide. So going back to what I was saying before about having structure and having a framework, this slide talks a bit about the approach that we take, and not just IoT and smart building transformation, but we use this for a lot of our other projects as well. And the first stage is the reimagine stage, and this is where we connect with the key stakeholders from the client side, as well as bringing some members of our team. And this is where we understand what your vision is, and also the business requirements that will need to be considered for us to take on this project. Once we've understood what the business requirements are and the vision, we then move over to the roadmap stage, which is where we put together a plan and help you prioritize what the business objectives are. Because, with looking back at those 8 points in the previous slide, there's so many things to consider, and perhaps they need to be considered at different stages. So it's really important to prioritize what are the main things that we need to focus on. And afterwards, it's obviously produced, so actually developing or building some kind of solution or technology that can then be, and this goes into the result stage, that can be adopted and integrated into your organization. And we also measure what the outcome is, and then see how we can make changes to the business practices to really leverage the benefits from these solutions. Next slide. So now that we've talked a bit about the approach, I want to quickly talk about how exactly can GlobalDWS support businesses along their adoption journey. And we have three main packages. And the way that we structure these packages is to accommodate to businesses that may be at a different stage along this adoption journey. So if you are an organization that might be in the earlier stages, and you're attending this presentation to see how you can start on this journey, then perhaps a strategy briefing session would be a great place to start to go a bit deeper into some of these concepts that we're discussing and explain how it relates to your business case, your use case. We also have an envisioning workshop where it could take about 5 to 15 days, but majority of the time spent is the engagement with the customer to understand what the objectives are, what the vision is for this project. And then we can host about a half day or 1 day, depending on the circumstance, but host a workshop to go through each of the points and actually build a roadmap. And at the very end, it's the solution engagement. And this is for companies that may be a bit mature and they understand what their plan is. They have a roadmap already in place for how they're going to get there, but now they're actually looking to deploy solutions like the service robots that Keon was talking about in a few slides before. So in that stage, we same as the previous ones, but this actually involves the deployment of the solutions within your organization. And once again, we track and measure what the successfulness of this project was, and also what the impact is that it may have had on your organization. Next slide. Yep. And so to end off the presentation, we thought it would be really nice to end off with a quote that I think definitely resonates with our company and the members of our team, but hopefully it also resonates with you. And the quote is, simply connecting a thing to the internet isn't enough. You must be able to ensure that the data generated by that thing can be leveraged to enable new business benefits. And this quote is so powerful because it really speaks to the core of the message that we're trying to convey in this presentation, which isn't just about installing devices and collecting data, but really making sure that the way we design these solutions are scalable, and it can actually help you realize new insights that you could then take action on. So we can conclude the presentation portion here, but we do have the Q&A. So I'm just going to switch over to the Q&A, and I saw that Rami started to respond to some of them, but I think we still have some time, so I'm going to read some of them, and I'll see if maybe anyone from the team wants to answer them. So I'll kind of open the floor. Or if there's anyone from the team that you would like to direct the question to, you can also mention that, and we can make sure that they answer it. So I'll start with Shahul, and he's asking, in a smart building, is it possible to monitor all devices which is connected in a single dashboard? So I will, I guess, volunteer that to Rami if you're here, and see if you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Dante. So the answer is yes, you can. And the main objective of the smart building is to integrate all the endpoints and gateways under one platform to be able to achieve the main business objective. And if you go back to what Dante specified in the roadmap, to start with connecting and managing those devices to achieve a certain level of automation to transform the business. So you will not be able to achieve that kind of automation and build a dynamic workplace if you still have certain components not connected. But at the same time, you will not be able to connect everything. There will be cost. So my main recommendation to look what are the main business value of adding any devices to the platform, and see how you will be able to automate and optimize your business operation processes to help and support your end users and customers. So the answer is yes, but there is a cost associated, and that's why we put kind of a roadmap, a master plan, and the roadmap how you can achieve that, to make sure everything is, there is a total cost of ownership, so you are not adding more and more devices without achieving your main business objectives. But from technical perspective, yes, you can connect all those devices. There are many options, either direct or through gateways. Back to you, Dante.
Yep. Nope, that's perfect. Thank you, Rami. And I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to read Wissam's question. I'm going to give that to you, Matt, because I know there was a point where you were talking about, what can companies do with old buildings, and if there's still an opportunity for them to apply smart devices to them. And the question is it possible to apply smart building and IoT to an old building? So Matt, I'll give you like 35 seconds or 40 seconds, however long you need, so we can get to the other ones. But the floor is yours, Matt.
Yeah, so absolutely. Really, one of the better questions to ask is, what's the age of the system that you're interested in integrating, rather than the age of the building? So if you take the Empire State Building in New York City as an example, that building is 80, 100 years old at least. But the systems in it, they're not the original systems that were implemented many moons ago. Those systems are typically refreshed on a 15 to 20 year cycle. And sometimes we're even seeing that start to happen faster. But it really is going to depend much more upon the age of the system than it is the age of the building.
Perfect. And Svetla, I'm going to read this question. So it says, do we consider building integrated photovoltaic, I'm going to mispronounce that, as a smart building, or is it part of the smart, if we consider it as a smart building, or is it part of the smart building? Could you provide any existing examples of IoT use in this regard? And he said energy management as an example. So Matt, is there any professional experience you can pull from that can answer this?
Absolutely. So that would be a component of the smart building system. And so this would, rather than building out a separate application as an example for monitoring the performance of that system, you can leverage what's built into the smart building platform for doing that. But in addition to that, in the context of understanding energy management, it's one thing to understand, hey, I just saw a spike in my energy yesterday. It's another to understand what caused that spike in energy. And so that's where the collection of the data from the different systems starts to help answer that question in a much faster way, to not only understand, yes, I had an increase in my demand, but what caused that increase in demand so that I can turn that into action and something that's actionable and go do something about it rather than just watching it continue to cost more money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that's
Thank you.
perfect.
And Dante, I would like to add, thank you, Matt. I think this is very important point. I would like to add, like, part of our smart building strategy and solutions. Also, we see, like, we try also to consolidate many operations. So when we have any new energy system, if you keep it as a silos, you will not be able to achieve that kind of consolidation and cost effective. So, like, the main objective of building that fully integrated smart building system to make sure how you will integrate the technology, the tools, and the process to support the human. So that's where I see it. In addition to the end user, there is also the operations team. When they have all those tools are integrated, I think they can work and collaborate easy together to achieve, like, more cost effective and efficient process inside their enterprise organizations. Back to you, Dante.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, so I think we have one more. I know we're at the 3:30 mark, but I just want to quickly do this last one. And I saw you already answered it, Rami, but it's from Ayman. And he's saying, don't you think that connecting the smart building platform with integrated smart grid will provide us with amazing solution that not only will save energy, but also gives better control for the smart building in different circumstances? And I'm assuming that when he's saying smart grid, is this kind of going into smart cities and smart communities? And I'll leave this to Rami, Matt, Kian, anyone who wants to answer this one.
I mean, maybe briefly, we can share like one of the framework that we put it, how to integrate the smart city with the smart building, because the smart building is part of the bigger smart city ecosystem. So there is, there is the answer, yes, but as you know, their integration, there is not the complexity, but there are factors that we have to consider, from the collaboration, the agreement, the contracts, all of those, but we see huge value in integrating all those two major platforms that will help like the city and different organizations to achieve their main objectives. But there are different factors when you try to integrate systems outside your control. Especially, you need to consider which devices you own and how's the collaboration between all those stakeholders to make sure you will not add any additional complexity to your system. But there are huge value from doing that. But you have to consider all the attributes.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I think maybe for the next IoT webinar, we can focus on that. But yeah, so I think that was the last question that we can do. But I do encourage all of the attendees to still feel free to send us an email or feel free to call us if you have any other questions about the presentation, any points that we mentioned, or maybe you have some questions about IoT or smart buildings for your own business. We encourage you to send us an email or call us, and we're more than happy to spend the time speaking to you to see how we can support you. And yeah, we just want to thank everyone for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
just
guys.
to share with the attendees, we will publish this webinar online. So if you miss any part, you can watch it online. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day.